Oh, hello. Welcome to the 2013 Hundie Challenge. Today we're going to be discussing American Idol by TED Talks. So this is my second Dreiser book, and it was light years past the first. If you haven't read my review or watched, whatever, I'm all a mess with all these different formats. If you haven't watched my review of Sister Carrie, go back and watch it. Pretty boring-ass book. It was one of those books that was like 500 pages that, except for the fact that you kind of want to get a slow burn, there's no reason the whole story couldn't have been told in, 100 pages. American Tragedy was considerably longer, about twice the length, about 900 pages. This book was with me for a while. But it was also a slow burn, and I gather that this is Dreiser's modus operandi. He gets you, involved with your characters. He gets you staying with them so long. You get to know the ins and outs of their life, their concerns, their relationships, and everything until you're, kind of bored so deeply into their heads, that you really get to know them. You really get to feel sorry for them when bad things happen, and bad things do happen. I can't remember the name of the jerk-off in Sister Carrie, but the most memorable thing about that book for me was how miserable, how truly pathetic, meaning in the classical sense of pathos, how pathetic he was, that he elicited such, sadness in me, kind of undeservedly so. He certainly did not deserve the sympathy, empathy, what have you, that Dreiser brought out. This was a much more coherent tragedy, perhaps no less tragic. This is the story of a man named Clyde Griffiths, and he has to go singing with his family out on the street corner for the glory of God every day as a child, and he resents them for it. So he also has to support them because they're very poor missionaries, and he resents them for that as well. So he becomes a bellboy, and he starts to get in with the bad crowd. I'm not 100% sure whether Dreiser is kind of a Christian apologist or if he's more of an agnostic, kind of criticizing Christianity. I'm a little on the fence. He was kind of at that time frame when maybe you couldn't openly, denounce the church, but maybe satirically you could sort of slip some of that in. I'm not sure entirely where he was going with that, but the church the various Protestant churches, what have you, did not come across so well in this book. So what happens is Clyde gets into an accident when he runs with a bad crowd of bellboys. He gets into an accident where one of the bellboys kills a little girl driving in a car. Then Clyde runs away. He takes a job with his rich uncle in what I assume is a fictional town in New York State. And living there, he is just a piece of shit, basically, but because he has the rich uncle who owns the factory, they feel sort of obligated to promote him at the factory for propriety's sake, because you couldn't have a Griffiths, toiling in the factory. So he gains a little bit of cachet in this town, but he's still a slumdog at heart, and he goes slumming it with one of the factory girls. Gets the factory girl pregnant, and I had to laugh. Honest to God, I was laughing, because for a huge portion of this book, they make it out like the true tragedy, the eponymous tragedy of the title, is having a fucking baby. Because those two cats, and I know this was the 20s, they went through hell and high water to avoid having this baby because they both knew it was going to wreck up their lives. And, of course, abortions were illegal, and I gather that morning after pills were illegal, and the ones that they finally got a hold of were just bunk. They were just chalk. And they found an abortionist. it was actually kind of satirical, this part. They heard that he was an abortionist, so they went to go see him, but it turned out he would only do it for you if you were rich. Not for the money, but because he wanted to spare your name. So because Clyde got a factory girl pregnant, she didn't have a name to be spared. And so this holier-than-thou doctor who was acting like, oh, well, you have to have a baby, I couldn't possibly do an abortion, even though he would do it for the rich people because he didn't want to, disparage their name or whatever. It was, I felt like it was kind of satirical for today, which means it was probably a bit of a, they were probably having book burnings and stuff in the 20s of this book. Anyway, I was mistaken about that. That was just me laughing because I thought it was funny. Obviously, I don't have kids. If you couldn't tell from all the toys I keep in the background. Those are mine. So the real tragedy is that Clyde comes to the point where, because he's rising in society, he has the eye of a society girl, but he's still got Roberta, the factory girl, on the hook, on the line, and he's going to owe her money and everything else. He ends up killing her, taking her out in a boat and drowning her. And from there it kind of transitions, and again, I know this was in the 20s, so for all I know this could have been the trope maker, but it almost went into that trope of, Jimmy's in jail, and is his mother going to see him, and will he see the priest, and will he repent before he goes to the chair? And the last, 100 pages or so of the book there was this big trial, too. That was another thing that was really funny and satirical. I almost glossed over the whole freaking trial. That also must have been kind of a little on the edge for 1920s, but they made out how political the trial was. How everything was about the DA wanting to win a local election to be the judge, so it's coming down real hard on Clyde, and these just like shitbird ambulance chasers that were on his defense team were like, ooh, money, hey, listen, Clyde, we know you didn't do it, but you just have to lie because no one will believe you didn't do it, so just lie on the stand. So these assholes are having him perjure himself, and meanwhile, all that the prosecutor can think about is, the money bags in his eyes because he's gonna wrap up this county for the Republican Party for, who knows how long if he comes down like a hammer on this kid. So, did he get a fair trial? Well, no. Of course not. It was all politicized. But was he innocent? Well, also no. He was a fucking piece of shit. He was, that's just the beauty of Dreiser. He tries to, he has it all from Clyde's perspective. So you know how Clyde feels like he's a good guy and didn't really do anything wrong. And I could have saved her if I had more moral courage and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, he's a shithead. He took her out to the lake with the idea of dumping her in. He lost his courage, but then he dumped her in, didn't save her. And he's like, well, that means I didn't really kill her. But he had the motive. It was all but killing her. So he kind of just, it was, a lot of complicated issues going on there. I was surprised how satirical it was, coming from the author of, Sister Carrie. But I think in the 30 years in between these books, he definitely improved his craft, definitely developed as a writer. So pretty good book. Weirdly, if you've got the time and you don't mind that kind of old-fashioned, stilted kind of 800-word sentence with old-fashioned, old-timey talk, if you can get over that, had a lot to say. And it was interesting seeing all this stuff that's kind of like procedural, simple whodunit we see on Law & Order every night. Seeing that from the perspective of the 20s, they didn't have Miranda rights. They didn't have all these evidence laws. Stuff was about, like, how moral did the kids seem? Voir dire, the jury selection was different. It was definitely an interesting piece of Americana. Thanks for tuning in. Next time we will be discussing the Wide Sargasso Sea.